Alrighty. Hi, my name is Winston Cam, and currently I'm a junior double major in art history and material science at Case Western Reserve University with intentions to pursue a career in exhibition design within art museums. Today I'm presenting a small exhibition project centered around 4 small interventions and engaging with artworks currently present within the Cleveland Museum of Art's permanent collection on display. Well, because exhibition design usually takes around 5 years before actual implementation, I conceived this project with the help of my advisor, Dr. Andrea in hopes of creating something a little bit more feasible and plausible that could be on display in the near future, perhaps. So the topic of my intervention regards the perception of 19th century Orientalist art, which has perpetuated exotic, savage-like imagery tied to territories conquered by European empires within the region of East Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East. So I've tried to pick a variety of artworks to help present a really holistic representation of these regions, although the conversation we're having for some more fitting artworks were really hard to place within the exhibitions on display right now in the CMA. So it was a hard balance between context, variety, meaning, and a little bit of personal taste, to be completely honest. So the first artwork here is Totem on the top left-hand side by Hervé Yumbi. It's essentially an amalgamation of 4 canonical African masks in sculptural forms. Within this particular sculpture, as one ascends the composition, it narrates the cycle of life between childbirth through adolescence to death and even the afterlife. I could go into excruciating detail about what each of the masks represent and which regions it originates from, what tribe, but I'll reserve that for my live Q&A. But overall, this composition reflects a truth to reception and that how masks are three-dimensional and should be viewed from multiple angles. So I chose Totem with Chinese hand laundry kind of with each other in a way, because it shows how 2 distinct periods assimilations can be represented. We have the rich blended African culture in contrast to the racial plight of Asian Americans as seen through Chinese hand laundry. Both represent 2 different ways to present contemporary attitudes about the past, which is why I've situated them within their respective ancient art galleries. Totem was actually on display at one point, which you can see a photo within the CMA. It's fairly large, about 6 foot tall, very striking. But as for Chinese hand laundry, when I first saw it in CMA's storage special exhibition in the COVID-themed isolation room, the solidarity really spoke to me. We can see in the bottom right-hand side, this deserted laundromat. There's a gritty brown, almost bronze architectural scrim almost. It seems quite flat. The artist Martin Wong is really interested in how complex issues like politics often disenfranchise immigrants. Really, although there isn't a lot of explicit ties to say racial stereotypes, perhaps the physiognomy or ridiculing a particular culture, which I'll touch upon later with the latter 2 artworks on the right-hand side of my poster. There is a lot to be understood with the struggle as a minority and assimilation of the dominant culture as our American society is being more and more diverse. And Totem by Rumbi as well is just a small example of how to represent ancient art through contemporary means, and Chinese hand laundry is a more modern representation of racial plight, for example. Now on the bottom right-hand side, we have 2 artworks by 2 prominent French artists, Giordano and Jerome. So the painting on the right is by Giordano. So Giordano was one of the most famous painters of Orientalism, where a lot of these works of art were intended as propaganda in support of the French imperialism efforts in the early 19th century. This is a sketch of the revolt of Cairo. It's pretty exemplary in showing Middle Eastern soldiers and royalty as backwards or other. There's a king. There's a heightened sense of femininity while he's wounded. He's dropping his sword, which is a sign as a flaccid phallic. On the flip side, there's also a Mamluk warrior holding him up. So he's saving this royal king. He's very savage-like. The facial features very angry, furious, almost like he's about to growl like a fierce tiger. Overall, this painting really exaggerates and demonizes the Egyptian enemy, given the intended audience as French royalty, but also of the French origin of the painter. So I've situated the Revolt at Cairo sketch with the woman in a veil by Jerome. So physically, they are kind of out of the way, but chronologically, they are almost 100 years apart, so that's important to note. But they still represent very similar ideas about Orientalism. So Jerome's bronze sculpture of this revealing veiled woman breaks stereotypes in a way, but in a negative manner almost. Women, perhaps in harems, resided in sacred rooms or palaces and homes. This idea of unveiling plays a lot into the gross sexualization of females in the context of the male gaze, especially at the time of Orientalism and imperialism. Surveillance as a form of domineering over women can also be in the context of imperialization. The form in which this woman open surveil is very reminiscent of the shape of an eye. You can see where she's pulling the headdress over her, almost opening it. And it presents a pretty interesting juxtaposition of watching the statue, but also in a way the statue watching the audience. These two works of art currently on display present a very archetypical representation of contemporary 19th century Orientalist art, which only makes sense to put these two together. So lastly, at the top left hand, we have two porcelain figurines. The left features a representative figure of Europe wearing a crown and holding an orb with a cross, suggesting its dominance over others and also the imperialization of Christianity and the spreading of that. And then we have a Native American figure representing America wearing feathers and a bow. The right couple features a very jarring African figure, a very black figurine wearing an elephant headdress and holding a scorpion, sparring with an Asian figure surrounded by perfumes and native fruits. These are very extreme exoticizations of these regions, highlighting the worst stereotypes at the time and the commodities European empires exploited from these respective regions. This kind of racist imagery became more and more popular in the 1700s onward as Europe gradually expanded through colonialization. When you think about it, and it seems quite obvious now, but imperialism is a thing of the past, and hopefully through my project and through art, we can all see that colonization can be and is often attributed to the root of racially driven imagery as propaganda. And so through visual art, it's pretty exemplary. In the 20th century, when almost every sovereign nation respects the boundary of others, there's really no need to perpetuate racial stereotypes through these sorts of imageries. It's only through hate and immorality and such. So I've included a map of the Cleveland Museum art in the bottom center of my poster here, and it shows 4 of the highlighted maroon hexagon shapes. So this is where I intend these spaces to be for my interventions. I didn't go into too much detail with each of the artworks, and maybe I could have dived more into sort of the analysis, but I know with a lot of art and presenting exhibitions, a lot of it is up to the audience to make their own judgments and draw their own conclusions. And so I hope I presented it in a way that might be understood for you as an individual to hope and make your own conclusions. So thanks for hearing me out and listening to our presentation on my Orientalism art exhibition. Thank you.